Welcome to the Men's Lifeline Academy, where we help men transform their lives to become the best version of themselves. So that's why we take time to bring on stellar men, men who have overcome challenges and are seeking to help other men and other people out in their families, communities, and in themselves. Now I'm your host. My name is Zach, and today I got Coach Jordan in the house today. Jordan is a former high school football coach. He's currently a finance teacher, and he started his own business teaching people about finances. So basically, he's a teacher by day and a finance coach by night. Jordan, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Zach. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story. And so tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I'm a finance teacher and a business teacher. I've been doing that for the last 12 years. I'm married, been married for about 9 years. I have three little
Yeah.
kids, ages 6, 4, and 2. So it's complete chaos at our house pretty much all the time. I'm a Christ follower, so that's the most important thing. And yeah, I coached football for 10 years, and it was a great experience. I had the opportunity to coach a couple guys that made it to the NFL, which is pretty cool. Still
That's
keep in
awesome.
contact with a lot of those guys. So it's been just a great journey so far. There's been a lot of challenges too, but it's been a great journey. And right now, just being a dad and being a good husband is kind of my main goal. And then, like you mentioned, I've started a financial coaching business on the side. Pretty new. It's a little over a year I've been doing this, so have a couple clients, but just starting to build that and kind of step into that where I felt called, and we'll kind of see what God has planned for me in that area as well. So I'd say that's a little bit about me.
No, I think that's a good summary, especially if we are, because a lot of times on your posts, I'll see that you're teaching and trying to share the gospel and trying to help encourage people. And I think that's awesome that you're spreading your faith, that you're living your faith out. And especially with three little ones running around trying to do not only your day job as a teacher, which I used to work in the school, so I fully understand how complex that can be, and starting your own business. So, what kind of led you maybe to being a finance teacher?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a teacher and football coach when I was younger, just playing sports and growing up in that realm. I just always loved the game, and I wanted to continue to be a part of it after I was done playing. And so I actually was going to pursue being a Spanish teacher, and then I forgot half of what I learned in high school because I got out of it for a year. So then I decided to pursue like really my second love, which was money and business. So I got into that, and I just always want to impact kids. And the reason being is, the way I grew up was I grew up in a broken home. I didn't have a lot of support from my parents, so I always wanted to have that ability to help those kids that didn't have the support at home or didn't have a dad, to empower them to be great in their lives. So that kind of is what led me to that road. And it's just been a lot of fun. And, for example, I teach about 150 kids a semester. So you're talking 300 kids on average that I can, potentially, not really me, but God through me, change the trajectory of a kid's life by just speaking victory over them, or
Hmm.
empowering them or helping them when they're going through challenges. Because in today's world, like, I fully believe that these kids are up against probably more than what I was up against when I was younger, in terms of societal challenges, technology, what they're exposed to. So it's been a lot of fun, but it's been a lot of challenges, and it's been very rewarding too. So yeah.
No, well, thank you for your service. It's always good to hear teachers who have passion for helping kids and understanding the struggles that they went through. So, what are some struggles that you're seeing kids today struggle with? I know you mentioned like technology. I know a lot of times the societal culture changes a little bit, but what are you seeing a little bit more of in the classroom compared to what we may see, let's say, on the news?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have heard about it, but like the mental health crisis, the anxiety, the stresses that kids are feeling today, and I do think, I don't want to say 100%, but 90% of it comes from what they're being exposed to on their cell phones. So I feel like we're living in a time where, like, we're not getting a lot of guardrails, especially
Mhm.
as like middle schoolers and high schoolers. I feel like some parents have just given this device to these kids that, it's limitless on what you can see. I mean, you can see. When Russia attacked Ukraine, you're going to see that within 30 minutes or
Hmm.
less on a cell phone, and kids are being exposed to those things, which they shouldn't be, and they're worrying about that stuff when they shouldn't be. So all that pressure, all that stuff they're seeing and being exposed to, I think is just pushing them to, high anxiety levels. And they're also seeing lives that are almost not real. They're seeing people that are posting all their highlights, which is what, people do on social media.
Right.
I get that, but they're comparing themselves constantly. So I'd say the cell phone and all that that brings is probably one of the biggest challenges. And then on top of that, and this has probably been, an issue for a long time, but I feel like it's probably gotten slightly worse. I just feel like there's a lack of parenting, like strong parents in the home right now.
Hmm.
Um, I talk to kids all the time, and I feel like they have no rules at all. And I think we are trusting high school, middle school kids to make these like high level mature decisions because of what they see and what they can talk about now because they see all those things. So I think in our heads we think they're actually more mature than what they actually are. And they're still developing, their brain is still developing. So I think putting too much on them, to be honest, and I think parents are doing that, and it's kind of a problem that I've seen, in the classroom.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I worked in the schools for about 4 years myself, and there was always that feeling that it was the school's job to kind of begun to raise the kids, really. I mean, we feed them, a lot of times breakfast and lunch, and
Hmm.
sometimes we would give them food to go home. And we were trying to teach them, the best way we could to live a good life and how to be a good student and everything. And
Hmm.
sometimes more of a parent was like, "Well, this is your job to take care of this."
Hmm.
So it's like, and then now my position now, it's like you kind of see where a lot of parents struggle with. So it's like a balancing act where you got the kids struggling, but at the same time you have the parents struggling because a lot of people I talk to, either they have the news on the moment they get home,
Hmm.
what's happening next, or again going on social media, and you have parents like sometimes comparing themselves or showing the highlight reels.
Hmm.
So how do you help kids in the classroom when you have to focus on teaching, instructing, and at the same
Hmm.
time you're seeing this kid like struggle with like anxiety because they're worried about whether it's the war in Ukraine or it's like this kid just went on this $2,000 vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, there's many ways, but I think the biggest thing that we as educators and parents or whatever it may be, I just try to speak victory into them. Try to encourage because a lot of teach. Some teachers are negative, and I don't think that
Hmm.
helps at all. So I think you have to speak victory over kids, especially when they're coming from a home that potentially could be all negative or they don't want to go home to. So
Yeah.
just kind of telling them what they can become. And my class, personal finance lends to that pretty well because I'm talking about life and how the decisions that I've made have got me to where I am. So I try to show them what they can become. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I had them all shut their eyes in class. I do this every year. I'm like, shut your eyes. I'm like, don't make it weird. Just shut your eyes. And some of them try not to. I'm like, nope, not doing this until all your eyes are shut. And I have them envision their life when they're 35, which is now how old I am. I'm like, envision your life at 35. And then I have them kind of walk through like a day, like a real quick day. Like, what are you driving? What house are you going home to? What job are you working? Do you go home to a spouse, to 8 cats? Like, what are you going home to? And I try to have them envision their life and basically GPS their life. And then after that, I'm like,
Mhm.
listen, you might come from a situation that's not ideal, or maybe your parents aren't in a great situation. I was like, that's not your future, though. I'm like, you can change that. So I try to give opportunities to speak that into them and just encourage them. And not every kid, it takes multiple times doing that with some kids, but
Right.
some kids you can see it when they open their eyes, and I show a bunch of pictures. I'm like, did you see this? Did you see this? And it's like a nice house or whatever. They get kind of fired up about it. So you have to like show them where they can go and then give them the tools to get there. And that's kind of how I've been doing it. And a lot of them, I had a kid yesterday after that. He came up to me afterwards. I think he comes from a rough situation too. I don't know him that well yet, but he was like, "Hey, I want to start a investing account." He was like, "Can you help
Oh,
me?" I was like, "Oh, absolutely." So you just plant those seeds. They don't always grow in that moment, but a lot of times, a week after, a month after, or even like a semester after, they'll come back and ask for guidance, and that's where you got them, and you can help them even more. So that's kind of how I do it in the classroom.
no, I think that's incredible. Very rarely do you hear about a teacher who really takes that extra initiative and step. And I know a few teachers who were fantastic and would pull kids aside, but okay, what's really going on? And a lot of kids open up, especially when they develop that rapport with them, that trusting relationship, and to go that extra step, not only in personal finance, but also that relationship aspect, because a lot of times we know that, or if we don't know, this be good educational piece that when we're making financial decisions based on what we desire, what we want, is it a want or a need? And going from there, and what are we willing to risk to have that better life? And just to give the kids hope. I mean, if you give someone hope, you can see a glimmer in their eye transform. And it could be for a second, it could be for a few minutes, but it's always so cool to see that change in them. Especially when I would talk to a lot of kids, and a lot of times they didn't always feel a connection with their teacher.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're changed by connection, right? Like we need each
Yeah.
other. Um, I believe in, Proverbs 27:17, that iron sharpens iron. So I think you need people in your life. You need people, in your camp that help you and empower you and encourage you. Because without that, like, which is kind of what's another issue that I didn't really say, is isolation.
Hmm.
I think there's this pandemic where we're isolating ourselves, and I think that is because of cell phones too. Because if I can be entertained and talk to a fake person online every day, why do I need to go hang out with Zach, in person? You know what I mean? So like, I think
Yeah.
kids are doing that now too. Like instead of going out on the weekends or hang out with their friends, they're like, hey, I'll just sit at home and stare at my phone all night or be entertained that way. And they're not truly connecting with others, which is not good. So I think that lack of connection is a part of that too.
And unfortunately, I think it's only going to get worse, especially with how AI is being transformed, where now they're talking about like a robotic girlfriend, boyfriend, friend, or something through some type of artificial intelligence. So it's like, some technology that may be meant to help certain people, it's being generalized to like everybody, where, like you said, people are much more lonely these days, much more depressed, anxiety's through the roof these days,
Hmm.
and cell phones are definitely available to us. Something that is such a oxymoron, where it's supposed to bring people closer and bring more connections, has actually done in a degree to that, because that's how you and I met. However, though, it's still isolating people, like you said. Well, why do I need to go out and have fun where I might be annoyed by people and I don't want to tolerate them? I can just sit on my phone and the person always agrees with me on the other side.
Yeah, you're right.
So, in coming from a hurt home yourself, what was your kind of saving grace, if you will?
Yeah, so when I was 10 years old is when my parents got divorced. And
Oh,
if anybody's been through it, I mean, it wrecks you. It really does, especially as a young kid. And we were a big family. I had four siblings, which did help because I had them to lean on as I got older. But yeah, I mean, when that happened, your insecurities go through the roof. You think it's like your fault, or like you question, like, why this happened to me, and you just feel like not good enough in general. And then you see your parents like fighting and just stuff that you don't want to see, right? And then
right.
when that happened, I was lost, for sure. I was lost 100%. And, I played sports, thankfully, and that really was part of the saving grace. But ultimately, it led me to Christ when I was in eighth grade. And that actually happened because my brother, who was older at the time, when I was in eighth grade, he was probably like a freshman in college or senior in high school, somewhere around then. And he had a girlfriend, and her dad was a pastor.
Oh,
And he kind of, talked to her about God. And my brother ended up getting saved and asked God into his heart, and then he told me about it, and I started to learn about it, and then I actually sat down in my now sister-in-law's house with her dad, and we prayed the Lord's prayer, and I gave my heart to God probably, a couple years after my parents got divorced, and that's honestly probably what got me through. I would say all of it. It was still really hard, and it still honestly is. Like, I don't even know if divorce ever, goes away and like never
Hmm.
doesn't impact you. I mean, there was a few years ago where I was in tears and wrote down in a journal like I forgive my dad, so
Oh,
it's just something that, I don't think ever leaves you, but at that time when I was younger, when I decided to follow Jesus, I had to make a choice like am I going to be the victim or the victor? So I remember I just felt this like calling like, this is not the end. I'm like this is going to propel you to be the best dad and the best spouse you can be. So make it different. So when I was young, I mean, I was probably 11, 12 years old. That like fire was lit in me that like someday I'm going to have a family and I'll have the opportunity to do it differently. And what do you know? I'm sitting in my basement because I don't want to wake up my kids. I have three little kids. I'm married to a beautiful wife and nothing's perfect, but
right.
we have a great family and God's in our home and it's I just feel incredibly blessed to be in the spot where I am today. And now my dad and I do have a relationship. It's not perfect, but we do have a relationship and we've healed from a lot of things, but it's something that, ultimately led me to Jesus, which is what I'm really thankful for. And now, having gone through that, which I think everything happens for a reason, the conversations I have with high school kids, because this is prevalent in the schools, is I've been there. I know exactly what you're feeling with your parents splitting up or whatever. So I think God has now used it to impact others, especially young people that are going through the same thing.
And that's the hard part about pain is that we tend to try to one up everyone's pain. Like you can have a kid that you don't know what it's like to come from a broken home, and you're like, we talking about you don't know who I am because a lot of times kids will paint the teacher as like this perfect person, like this perfect role model who's done nothing, who did everything right, and they don't understand the pain until the teacher's like, listen, I've been there, I know what it's like to go through a divorce. My parents were divorced, and all to her, and then the kid kind of takes a step back, like, oh, and that's why I really try to work hard, I'm sure, and I can tell you do this too, is let's use pain as a teacher to bring about connection, not division.
Yeah.
So everyone, unfortunately, in life will go through scars and everything. The question is, how do we use that pain to help other people? And pain is something that never feels good, and it may never go away. We may learn how to cope or manage it a little bit better. But ultimately, that scar's gonna be there, and the best way to overcome that is just to help someone else, and then go on your own road of recovery too, whether through prayer, meditation, and forgiveness is honestly the biggest one though. That really frees people from a lot of anger and hatred, and true forgiveness, where it's not gonna be maybe a one-time thing, but a process to go through it. Because with forgiveness, it's really for you to walk in that freedom, knowing that this bondage, this hatred, this resentment is not gonna affect your future family.
Yeah. And you're right. It will. If you don't, I mean, I've learned it time and time again. If you do not forgive people, it's like chains, holding you
Yeah.
down. Ultimately it hurts you. A lot of people feel like, no, I'm not going to forgive that person because they wronged me. Like they're going to feel that. It's like, no, if you take that approach, like it's actually hurting you more than it is them, because a lot of times they've moved on, and they kind
Right.
of forget about it anyways. So like I've learned that time and time again, like, if you have been hurt, and again, hurting people hurt people. We got to remember that we're
Hmm.
all human and we have to extend grace. I've hurt people, and we have to remember that like we're not perfect. So why should I not give that person grace because they're human? You know what I mean? So if we have the ability and intentionally forgive people, it's going to free us up more to be a better version of ourselves and be better for our families and our spouses or whatever it may be. So yeah, it's incredibly important to forgive and be able to move on because it's freeing. It really is.
Well, and that's how we also receive forgiveness too. Is so when we forgive others, we also receive it too. And sometimes that might be withheld. And I don't know the exact scripture of that, but I know it mentions that the Father will forgive those who forgive, and He might withhold some healing or forgiveness if you're holding on to somebody else, because it's like, who made you judge?
Mm-hmm.
So probably one of the better books. There was a novel was The Shack. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie or read the book.
No.
So The Shack, you might want to look into it. It's a fantastic book where it talks about pain and feeling lost and how a tragedy can just completely change your life. And we might go through different situations in life, but it's really meant to be healing to us in a way that we would be when we face the pain versus cover it up and take time to address the root pain and the, the hardships of it. That's where we see growth and forgiveness and sometimes restitution for. So in that case, the guy lost his daughter, and she was unfortunately murdered in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So going through all that pain and everything, and not knowing where her body was or anything like that, really.
Jeez.
Yeah. And it talks about how this man goes through and, finds God and everything. And through that, things were resolved. It was still painful, still hurtful, but he got a glimmer of God in the three persons as it's talked about in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's powerful.
It's a very powerful and emotional book that it can be very difficult to put down and read at times too.
Yeah.
It's that reminder that to begin with healing, we have to get to that deep rooted issue and to bring that to God. And a lot of times we don't because we feel shameful or don't really know how to.
Yeah, for sure.
So, what kind of, so going from just kind of make sure we talk about your whole story with the time that we have, then what led you to now teach people about financial as like a side gig or business?
Yeah, so, my passion was coaching and teaching. And
Hmm.
I coached for 10 years in high school. And it was a lot of fun. But when we were expecting our third child, things were getting a little crazy. My other two were 4 and 2 at that time. So we had two young kids. My wife was pregnant. And there's, challenges with that. And I'll never forget, I felt like coaching football was kind of coming to an end or at least a break
Hmm.
because of how hard it was getting at home. I was getting home at 7:30 at night every single night. Friday I wouldn't see the kids. So yeah, people don't really understand like how big of a time commitment unless you've played, or coached. I feel like people don't really understand how much of a time commitment coaching high school football is. I mean, it's an additional, I'd say 40 hours a week on top of the
Cool.
40 hours a week I was teaching. So that strain was there. And I'll never forget, I think it was maybe week 5. We were playing a good team. And I was the special teams coordinator. So I was in charge of special teams and like the kicking units and so on. And I remember being out on the field the last 3 seconds of the game. And I was in the huddle on the field. All the kids are nervous. They're about to try to kick the game winning field goal to win it all. And I could feel it. I was like, we're going to win this game. And I told them all, I was like, guys, we've done this 100 times in practice. So long story short, they go out, kick the game-winning field goal, and you would think I would have went crazy and like jumped up and down, but like I didn't, because I saw that field goal go in, and I was like, I just feel like this is the last year that I'm gonna coach. I just felt it in that moment. It was weird. I don't know why. It was a God thing. I felt it was just the end, and I went home, and my wife didn't go to the game because you know two little kids and they were already
Right.
asleep. And I told her what had happened, and she was like, "Oh, that's cool." Just like the response that I got, and it wasn't her fault. She just had been through a lot.
Yeah.
And I just knew it was over at that point. I was like, "Okay, I got to give it my all the rest of the season." And then I gave it up, and I had a void in my life for sure. There was a big void that I felt in my life. So what I did was, again, leaned on God, and I prayed to God, and actually read a book called Anonymous, which is a
Okay.
fantastic book. It's all about Jesus and his life. He was 33 years old before he was crucified, but his
Hmm.
first 30 years, there's only four records of him. And nobody really thinks about this. But his first 30 years, and he was a carpenter, and there's only like four references of him. When he was born, when he was like in the temple one time, and a couple other times. But it was his last 3 years that we still talk about to this day, and we will forever, right? So I remember reading this book, and I just felt like I was supposed to be anonymous, and that was hard for me because I was always in front of people. I was always coaching, I was always motivating, I was always in front of football players, and I just felt like I needed to study the word for a year and be quiet, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So I took a year and I wasn't on social media or anything at this point and just was studying and praying and just kind of being quiet and kind of to myself. And then it was this past February, I just felt like this nudge. I prayed about it and I wrote it down. I was like, I need to start coaching people, and I felt like what's my talents? I'm good at motivating and I'm really smart with finance. I'm like, those are two things that I can use. And faith, family, and finance like came to my head, and it's been in my head for a long time. I was like, I need to start posting on social media. So I just, took the leap of faith and started posting daily. I think I was posting to nobody at first and posting into a wall. But eventually I started making connect. Just, it was crazy. Like just the people you meet at the right time that like would enhance you, or like retweet it or whatever. And then people start reaching out about, hey, do you coach people? And I got a couple people and started doing that on the side, and that's kind of how it started. And I'm like, man, I just keep getting people asking me. Former players have reached out to me, former students have reached out to me, friends have reached out to me because I've been posting all this stuff. People in my district have reached out to me.
Wow.
So just by taking that step of faith and listening to God's call, he's doing all this through me, and I don't know what it's going to be. It could be big, could be small, I don't know. But that's kind of led me to, financial coaching. And again, I don't even know what the exact, clear path is yet. I have ideas, but it's getting clearer and clearer the more steps of obedience that I take. So, and that's led me on this show. So we'll see where this takes.
Yeah, no, and I just want to say, thank you for like sharing your story. It's not easy to share that level of pain that you went through, and I just wanted to. I always like to highlight people who are trying to make people's lives better, and I think it's so important to do that, especially with you, having three kids. It's not simple. It's expensive, and being that light, being trying to help people with their finances, where everyone these days are stressed financially. And a lot of people these days are living paycheck to paycheck and they're not knowing what to do. And especially when food goes up and you get milk used to be, let's say, $1.50, now it's all of a sudden $5. And eggs and if you got grown kids, they're gonna eat their own whole entire fridge. So and it's learning how to make every dollar count, especially the more, for example, the more I've financially become literate myself and I've been reading books and trying to figure out the best way to do that is realizing how much we're taxing a dollar, right? We get a paycheck, that's tax. We pay for food, groceries, a house, and there's like so many taxes on your dollar. It's like, how can I make this last? So to always see people like you who are out there grinding it out, who are really smart financially, and have the systems put in place to help other people who may not have that financial literacy.
hmm Yeah, too, and to be clear, just so if anybody's listening to this, like I don't make a ton of money. Like I don't know if anybody knows this, but teachers don't make tons of money, and my wife only works 1 day a week. So like,
Oh,
being financially free, which we are, like, we're doing this on a lower income, not the lowest, but a lower
right.
income or a pretty modest income. So, if somebody's watching this thinking like, oh my gosh, he makes a lot of money, it's like, nah, like I can help anybody do it on a pretty modest income. So it's not about really how much money you make, it's how you handle that money. So I think that's kind of where I'm a little bit different compared to some people, because some people doing this are making, gosh, $250,000 a year. It's like, heck yeah, I could budget on that much money. That's a lot of money, you know?
Yeah. Unfortunately, with that much money comes more expensive toys because it's like, well, I make 250. I can buy this. I can go on this vacation and do this. And all of a sudden, you start seeing the bill stack and the credit card go up, and you're like, okay. how am I going to make it this month? And that's like the biggest question. And I always see the biggest freak out, like let's say on Dave Ramsey's show, where he goes, "You make $250,000 and you're how much in debt?" It's like it just got away from us. It's like okay, but we still have to have that responsibility, accountability. I mean, I know it's a show, so it's gonna be a little bit more dramatic and things like that. But it really drives in the point that do the best you can to become financially literate. And if you need help with financial literacy, we got a guy right here. So with Coach Jordan, all his socials, so his X and his business are all going to be in the description below. So if you need help, reach out to him. If you're struggling and you need help and you're up to the wazoo in debt and you don't know how to budget, or you want to learn about financial literacy because no one taught you. Your parents didn't teach you, your teachers didn't teach you, and you're just like, what is money? What is debt? What is good debt, bad debt? We got Coach Jordan in the house today, so go reach out to him. And Jordan, as we kind of wrap up, what's like a sentence you want to speak to somebody today who might be in your shoes about, let's say back when they're 10, 12 years old, and then you want to speak some life into someone today?
Yeah, I'll start with, it's never too late. It doesn't matter what age you are, whether you're 20, 50, it doesn't matter. You can be used, like God can use you in any season of life. I mean, Moses wasn't used till he was like 100 years old. Yeah, so like it really doesn't matter how old you are. And, usually your struggles can be your triumph if you let them. All right. So a lot of those challenges you've gone through, they can be what holds you back or what propels you forward. And I think you mentioned it earlier, you have to get to the root cause of that, and it
Mm-hmm.
might take meeting with somebody to do that, or, somebody to help you through that. But, face those head on. It might be a line in your past that you got to go run to that roar. And it's scary. Like, I don't even like when I was talking about my dad and stuff, it does get a little emotional at times. Like, you don't want to think about, that pain that you felt. But in order to heal, you have to go to the place of pain. And I would encourage anybody to, gosh, just reach out to somebody to do that. Find a friend, find a coach, find somebody to help you through that, because on the other side of that is victory. And I want people to walk in victory, because everybody has the ability to empower people to just make great things happen in their life. You just have to let that stuff all happen, and you got to work through all those challenges. So, just reach out to people. We need each other. We need connection. God did not design us to be isolated. He was with people all the time. He was with his 12 disciples. He was healing. He was helping all the time. So if we're supposed to model our life after Christ, we should be walking with each other too. So if you need help, like DM me, message me. Like, I'm more than happy to help you, because I want to see you have a good life, and be happy and fulfill your God-given destiny.
Amen, amen, amen. That was really well said. And if your man needs some extra help, DM myself. We got the Men's Lifeline Academy Discord group. It is a script subscription based, so ask questions about that. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can kind of continue to help men grow and learn. And go out there and have a blessed day.